That's
when I don't get
okay.
you. So I am going to fiddle around with
I could just riff.
some stuff.
I could
real
tell one of my
quick.
favorite jokes. Tell this joke to
Technology.
everybody.
You can
Yeah.
run. You can run the show while I'm sorting things out.
All right, I'll do it. So here's one of my favorite jokes, and it's kind of a dad joke. It used to be a regular joke, but it's a dad joke, and I'll tell this joke. You probably all have heard it. So there's this baby polar bear. And the baby polar bear goes to his mother and says, Mom, am I a real polar bear? Am I a 100% purebred polar bear? And the mother bear says, of course you are, son. I mean, I'm a real polar bear. God knows your father, he's a real polar bear. But the baby bear, unconvinced, goes to his father and says, Dad, am I a real polar bear? I mean, am I a purebred 100% through and through polar bear? Father bear looks at his son and says, why, of course you are, son. I mean, God knows I'm a real polar bear. And certainly your mother, she's a real polar bear. And grandma and grandpa, both sets, they're real polar bears. Why do you ask, son? And the baby bear looks up at his father and says, well, Dad, I'm fucking freezing. So that's the joke. I love that joke. It's one of my favorite jokes. I don't know if you even heard that or not, but if you laughed, if you guffawed, I don't know. We'll soon see, I guess. But Aru, can't hear me yet. I don't know. I got one smiley face from Flack Checker. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. I know it's kind of a dad joke, but hey.
Gotcha.
Do you have me now?
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
I was gonna like freak out. I finally got him, and it's falling apart on me.
No.
Much.
I appreciate you kept it together. You soldiered through.
Thank you.
New and you're wearing the right shirt. That's a command shirt.
Yep.
I appreciate that. You're on the command track. And now, do you pronounce it Aru?
Perfect.
Aru. Well, I did say to you, Kia ora, mate. So I'll say it to you again.
Kia ora.
I'd be drinking a Monteith's Black, but this is Diet Coke, and I'm kind of off the sauce for a while. So, but if I was in New Zealand, I'd be drinking a Monteith's Black right now.
Yeah, I when I was in Southland, right, which is where that's made in, right. So I would try it out because I'd work at a sports bar called Northland Tavern. Were you ever in Southland? In Vicargill?
No.
Okay.
I was never there.
So that's where I got to try out all the beers, because
right.
It's part of the culture. So thank you, Mr. Burnett. And, for those who don't know, how about, a little short bio, because, of course, we're Kiwis. We don't know that much stuff about a lot of people on the pop culture scene.
Oh.
But not only that, but the experiences that you've had. So I'm going to put you solo, and then you can do a bio, and we'll, just to talk about yourself a little bit.
Sure. So my name is Robert Burnett, or I go by professionally Robert Meyer Burnett. I use my middle name because there's another Rob Burnett that was much more successful and wealthier than I was. So I went by my middle name so we weren't confused. But I started working. I grew up in Seattle, Washington. I always wanted to work in film. And I moved to California in 1988 to finish up college at USC at film school. And I started working in the entertainment business in 1989, and the first movie I ever worked on was Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. And I did a lot of things. I worked as a PA. I worked as a story analyst, reading screenplays for a living. I became a film editor in 1993 when I worked at Full Moon on a movie called Arcade. And in the 90s, I specialized in editing and being a post-production supervisor on usually first-time directors' low-budget features. And I was able to do this because in 1995, I learned the Avid, which is an editing software that really allowed one person, if they wanted to edit a film, which was great for me. And in 1998, I made my feature directing debut with a movie called Free Enterprise. that starred Will and Grace as Eric McCormack and William Shatner and a number of other actors. And then that movie didn't make any money. It was kind of a cult favorite, but, you know, sort of curtailed. I spent a long time trying to get another movie made. And in the late 1990s, early 2000s, DVDs hit the scene. And I became working full-time creating special features for DVDs. And I was working for a company called Curdy Pellerin, and we were working on all the Disney and Pixar stuff. And then we got the contract to do Lord of the Rings. And the first time, I worked on Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers. And then I also had started my own, on the side as a hobby, my own DVD special features production company. And I had to leave before we finished Return of the King because Disney hired me to go back to New Zealand to do The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So 2002, 2003, and 2004, I spent a lot of my time going back and forth between New Zealand. And we were in Wellington a lot when we were covering Lord of the Rings. And we were like, because we worked on the extended versions and the 10 hours of documentaries for each disc, we really started working on each movie right when it came out. So it took us a whole year to finish the special features for like Fellowship while the extended version was being made. And then when Two Towers was released, they would release the Fellowship disc with the appendices on it. And I loved New Zealand. And when I was in Wellington, I sort of lived at the Duxton, but I hear it's not the Duxton anymore. And I love the Duxton because it was right across the street from the New Zealand Film Commission. And then it was kind of kitty corner to the museum that's on Wellington Harbor. And then if you walked out of the hotel and took a right, you could go into sort of downtown Wellington. And there was a Molly Malone's, an Irish pub that served Kilkenny on tap. There was a great restaurant called Logan Brown. And then when I worked on Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, we were all over New Zealand. We were all over Auckland, but then we went to the South Island. We were in Oamaru and Elephant Rocks. And then we were in Christchurch for months, going up to Flock Hill and shooting the battle sequence. So, and I was a huge fan of New Zealand movies, even before I was in New Zealand. I love Jeff Murphy's like Utu and the science fiction film The Quiet Earth. Of course, I loved Once Were Warriors and movies like Death Warmed Up, and then Peter Jackson's early stuff like Bad Taste and Meet the Feebles and Brain Dead and Heavenly Creatures. So I really, really was a fan of the New Zealand independent film scene of the late 80s and 90s. So that was a lot of fun. And now I'm working on a film, a low budget, call it exploitation / horror film called White Devils that we're just finishing up. And that was written by a South African playwright. And a film I produced and edited called Tango Shalom is opening next month in Berlin at the Jewish Film Festival there. And then it opens across Germany in October. So that's just a quick background of what I've been doing. And then I've been on YouTube since 2015 as an entertainment pundit. I have my own YouTube channel, The Burnett Network, and I'm really enjoying that too. So that's sort of me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Yeah, it's like it's better for me to get you to talk about it than me going, oh, this one and that one, that's one. It's like, because I was looking at the long list on IMDb, I'm like, yeah, that's a long list that I'm never going to be able to
Yeah,
cover.
I mean, and it's so weird because people always ask you, well, what is it you do? Yeah. And I mean, part of the problem with my career, the reason I've never become, say, rich, is because I love to get my hands dirty, and I love post-production and I love editing, and I never joined the editors union. So I was always working, because there was a lot of editorial stuff, like the special feature stuff I was working on, that wasn't union. So I didn't want to join the union, where I probably could have worked my way up as an assistant editor and then had worked on really big features, but I wouldn't have nearly had as much fun, and nor would I have been an editor on a film. I mean, even though, Tango Shalom's a really low budget movie, but I was able to be the editor, the post supervisor, the VFX supervisor. And you know, nobody on bigger films, I would never be able to do all of those things.
Yeah.
And you know, it's really interesting. Right now I'm working on one of the new things in entertainment that's become very popular are scripted podcasts, which is basically radio dramas. Like Jessica
Okay.
Chastain
Yeah.
just did one. You can listen to Neil Gaiman. They did great versions of The Sandman.
Yeah.
So I'm working now with mystery writer Max Allan Collins. Um, and he wrote like Road to Perdition that the movie was based on.
Right.
And we've teamed up and we're going to do scripted podcasts or dramas based on his Heller detective novel series. And as a matter of fact, I got a script from him today. We're going to crowdfund the first episode, and he sent me a 12-page script. So we're going to record this script for the crowdfunding campaign that shows what we can do, and we're beginning the casting process of that right now. So that's yet something else I'm doing.
Well, that's the thing. Like when you're not part of anything that's like keeping you like in a union, right? You can just go and jump around, do whatever you want. And I mean, I kind of like I was 16 when I left my union, like which was I think it was like I had to do with factory workers union.
Sure.
And I was like 16 years old, getting paid $6.50 an hour, and these people would show up once a month and go, oh yeah, they should get more. And I'm like, and then like later on, I just went, I don't want to be part of this. And next thing you know, my wages went up. My wages just went up because I wasn't stuck to a legal thing that said you should be getting this much. And I went to my boss and I went, hey, I could do it some money. And next thing you know, I got 50 cents more. Yeah. And so at 16 years old, when you realize that these legal things that they, kind of hold you back from expanding whatever you want. Now I've been able to ever since just go wherever I wanted to, do whatever job I wanted to do. Like, I mean, you talk about like Avid and stuff like that. I mean, I did 3 years of digital filmmaking in Invercargill in about 2004 to 2006. And after that, I had my car accident. So it was like, no more filmmaking. And now I'm doing comic books. Right. So
that's great.
Yeah. So one thing I did want to talk about is because you mentioned Once Were Warriors. So a friend of mine, who's a good friend of mine, a local friend here, has written this book, horror, right? Short story horror. So I wanted to see if you want to check that out. But at the back there is Mike Alan Duff from Once Were Warriors.
Wow. I first of all,
right?
I love horror.
That's why I wanted to mention that.
Horror anthologies are my jam. I mean, I can't tell you how many horror anthologies I have. I love horror. It's one of my favorite genres. And in terms of reading, I've probably read more horror than I've read science fiction.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I'd love to get a copy of that. I'll look for it too.
Oh, I mean,
but yeah, I mean, it's funny because one of the things about Once Were Warriors, and Utu, we in the United States know nothing of Maori culture.
Right.
Nothing. And it was really interesting. That was, I mean, I saw Utu, I want to say, at the Seattle Film Festival, and which I loved. And then, Once Were Warriors is Lee Tamahori's film, and then he went on to direct a Bond movie. But Once Were Warriors, sort of the modern plight of Maori, and it was really interesting to find out about. And again, this is why I love filmmaking from around the world. They sort of grew up watching all movies from everywhere because it's the best way to learn about culture, and other people's. And Utu's, that movie kicks ass. And it was really funny when I moved moved into the Duxton. I was so there's Jeff Murphy, who was the second unit director, one of the second unit directors on Lord of the Rings. He had made, I want to say he made Utu first, but then he made a science fiction movie called The Quiet Earth.
Right.
And I loved that movie. And
Quiet Earth might have come earlier.
Yeah, maybe it did. Maybe it came early. You couldn't get it. And I was going across, and this is in 2002.
Oh,
and
no,
I was
right. It came out 2 years later.
And I was going across the street, and I was going to the New Zealand Film Commission, and I'm like, look, I would like to get the rights to. There I was, just walking across the street, going, hi, because I wanted to start my own home video label, and I wanted Quiet Earth to be the first movie that I put out on home video, and it was like the New Zealand Film Commission was never open, like nobody was ever there, and when somebody was there, they couldn't really help me. And of course I was there, I was working, so I couldn't, it was hard for me to, and then somebody else got the rights, like Arrow put it out. It's been put out, but and there's a soundtrack album for it as well. It's been put out by multiple companies, but like Fox put it out on Laserdisc. I had it on Laserdisc, but then you couldn't get it anymore, and it was frustrating. So I tried to get Quiet Earth.
I want to talk about like you were talking about like Once Were Warriors, right? So at the time Once Were Warriors came out, I'd just come away from Auckland. So when I was 16, I moved to Auckland, and you know how Auckland's, right? Pacific Islanders, Maori, people from all over the world, Asians, you know. And so I lived in a kind of like a more suburb called Penmure, Mount Wellington area. So which is like very much South Pacific, and you know, Maori, lower, sort of like lower economic sort of thing. And so I lived amongst that. And so, you know, for about 3-4 years as a worker, and my friends were Maori and Pākehā as well, and I'm Indian, right, from Fiji. So around me were all, you know, very different national cultures, like Tongans, Tokelauans, Indians from like from Bangladesh, where the owners of the factory I worked in, you know, making cookies. Right? And so I got to experience that. So, but in '94, I think was when the Once Were Warriors came out, and I went to see Once Were Warriors with at that time I was doing my second year of my chef's course, right, my second bar, and all of us, like a team of us, went from, you know, that we lived together at a nurse, like they had like a hostel, and we all lived there, and so all different, you know, students from the chef school, and so we went to see it, and when I was watching, I was furious when I watched that movie Once Were Warriors. Like the reason for that is that one of my friends' sister was in that situation as that girl was in there.
Oh wow!
And I did not enjoy that movie at all. I came out.
Well, it's pretty hardcore. It's not exactly. Yeah.
And I was like, you know, it's like, what the, you know, and I was like, oh, why am I seeing this like this in front of me? And like a lot of people, oh, you know, this and this. I'm like, you have no idea. I've had a friend who just went through that with her father, right? And which, you know, and you're like, here's the uncle, and it's like, you know, and you kind of like in that situation, you're the one who wants to have the bottle in your hand, right?
Yeah.
And you're the one who wants to have it, and you know, and so I think for us, I think a lot of people don't realize. Like I remember talking about that subject maybe in about, maybe 99, right? 99 on radio. And I had a call in, and somebody actually said to me, we don't talk about this in our community in Maori culture because we know it happens. It happens a lot, but we don't talk about it. And it's like, yeah, but that's not the only culture that happens in.
Right.
Right. So so everybody's thinking it's in Maori culture that this happens in, like sexual abuse and all that of children doesn't only happen in Maori culture, it happens everywhere. And so it was kind of like for people who didn't get to see that, like such a violent, such a emotional way, they thought it was the bee's knees. But like even like I remember somebody from Canada, like amongst the indigenous, Indian culture there, like American natives and so on. One of my best friends is a Native American who I'm in business with from Rising Sun Comics, right? So he's I get to understand that they have that in their culture as well, and it's it's kind of like this hidden thing you don't talk about, but it happens, but like nobody wants to talk about it. And I think that movie just said enough,
Yeah, no, it's funny because I didn't feel, I felt that it was universal. I mean, because the idea that it was about Maori culture was one thing, but it was a really interesting, like you said, and I think it also has to do that it's as much about economics and what poverty can do and what racism. I mean, it's so interesting because one of the things America doesn't we don't understand that every culture is racist but different than America is racist.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so like we don't, because we don't have any. I remember watching, there's a British movie called My Beautiful Laundrette, and it was made
Seen
in
it?
it was made in,
Saw it in my teens when it came
yeah,
out.
and it
Yeah.
was funny because it was about Pakistani immigrants to like London, and the discrimination they faced, you know, and how they call them Pakis and stuff. And when I was seeing this movie, I'm like, why are people prejudiced against people from Pakistan? In America, I'm like, why? I didn't understand that. And what's really interesting is all the talk about race in the United States. You know, it has to do with the minorities. You've got Black Americans, you've got Latino Americans, you have Asian Americans, but we don't have any understanding of racism, like how Asian cultures are racist against each other.
Yeah.
And
against each other. That's something they don't understand, right?
No,
like South Indian, West Indian, Pakistani, India. Why?
No, and we don't, because we don't even think about that. Like, we don't even understand in the United States. Like, we talk about slavery in America, and most Americans think that when the transatlantic slave trade began, that we only had African slavers selling slaves to the U.S. We don't understand that at the same time, you had those same people were also selling slaves to the Middle East in larger numbers than here in America. But in the Middle East, they were castrating their slaves so they didn't procreate. And that there was also the Barbary slave trade, where you had Africans that were enslaving. They would go all the way up to New Zealand and steal like white women from New Zealand and enslave. I mean, from Iceland, pardon me. The Barbary pirates would go up to Iceland and enslave white women and bring them back down to Africa. We don't in America have any understanding of that. And it's so you watch these movies about other cultures and the racism that goes on. Americans are like, wait, there's other racism in the world? It's such a weird thing, because most Americans, we don't, like 65% of our population doesn't have passports. And what's really interesting in winter here in California, if you go up to like Mammoth Mountain, which is a big ski resort, most of the people that work, well, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of the people that work at Mammoth are Kiwis and Aussies, because it's your summer, and the Kiwis and the Aussies travel. You know, they leave and they travel around the world, and they'll get jobs at like ski resorts and stuff. And
we're the most traveled people in the world. I think.
And it's so much fun to go, and that's why traveling I have to say that New Zealand is in terms of the people in New Zealand are some of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. I mean, it didn't matter where you were on New Zealand. Somebody'd be like, "Oh, you're from America? Come have breakfast with us." I'm like, okay. You know, it was fantastic. And of course, New Zealand being, I mean, you can hear about how beautiful New Zealand is, but what is it Rotorua that has the natural hot springs?
Yeah.
I mean, when my wife, I was married at the time, when my wife came down, we drove all over the North Island, and it was just incredible. And then you think, well, this is beautiful. And then you go to the South Island, and it's like, oh my God, you know, it's amazing.
Yeah. I think that's before you came on, I was mentioning that, like, how you know, Peter Jackson just put us on the map to show the beauty of it through Lord of the Rings. You know, you could just scope of it. You know, when you look out to the mountains and you see just the lush open area, and you think like, well, that's how New Zealand's like. Well, we do have, you know, cities and stuff like that in urban areas that are not like that. But it's such a great, you know, great tourist thing for us, because I mean, I'm proud of New Zealand. Like, I think if you, which, you know, I find interesting when I hear people like saying, "Oh, you know, I hate America" and stuff like that. But I'm like, you got to be proud of your nation, because that nation's given you everything you've had. Like, I'm a migrant, right, from Fiji, and I came here when I was like about 8 years old. So I'm about 41 years in New Zealand. This is my home, you know, and so I'm as proud as I am of our nation. And of course, there's little things that I don't like, but doesn't mean that I still am not proud of what we have achieved. And we've really achieved a lot in the world stage.
Oh, well, I have to say, I mean, that's one of the things about the United States that I think is really problematic now, is that our our population is actively working to not be proud of the United States.
Yeah,
And I
I
think
can
that's
understand
I
that.
think that's by design. I think that,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to get into the
Hmm.
weeds, but I do think that the United States is, we have been targeted by, let's call them bad actors from around the world
Yeah.
that have used things like social media. No one can, they can't overcome our military might, but
Yeah.
there has been a very targeted and very clever campaign.
Yeah.
Call it, I don't want to call it psyops, but we've been the victims of the utilization to what they've weaponized things like social media to create division
Agree.
in the United
100%
States,
agree.
and they're
Yeah.
really good at it. And
Yeah.
we've walked into this trap, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate. I think hopefully we'll pull it together. But I will say something else about New Zealand, and one of the things I really loved when I was there, and I think I mentioned to you, I loved the New Zealand music scene.
Right.
And I went to concerts all the time, and then I discovered this band called Fat Freddy's Drop.
Right.
And and you can go on YouTube and you can watch Fat Freddy's Drop. They're not like the Grateful Dead, but going to one of their concerts is an insane experience. I mean, these guys they would play, like, one song would be 25 minutes long, and they would just do solos and riffs, and it was absolutely incredible. I think I saw them like 6 times, and they're not like they're kind of a loose collective. It's different people would come on and play with them, but man, they were great. And there was other New Zealand bands that I went and saw too, dance bands, and I love that about New Zealand. I mean, it was incredible, and yeah, this is this
Let me. I'll put something on so people get, and then we'll come back to it. So
yeah.
since you're mentioning it, so
What was
right.
What was so
So
interesting about this band is they would play reggae 1 minute, techno another, electronic dance
yeah.
music. I mean, they were riffing in and out, like you just showed, like a horn section that's playing, like that was totally a reggae vibe. But it was amazing to watch these guys, and the energy and stuff, unbelievable.
I think that has to do with the influence of every other culture on New Zealand.
Yeah,
Like a lot of what we experience is coming from the US. I mean, most of our media is from the US and the UK. But now we have, for the last 20 years, we've, like, you're wearing a Kira t-shirt there, right? So we come to experience stuff like, Robotech and stuff.
yeah,
We get to experience anime, and we get to experience manga, K-pop now, and also, we get to experience all the K-dramas. And so we get influenced by a lot of overseas Western cultures and Middle Eastern cultures, Asian cultures, but along with Bollywood, right? But sometimes that, for our urban youth, has kind of meant that they lose their identities as who they are. And so that sort of has created this sort of, like, I felt like when I was living in Auckland in my teens, that there was this, like, the helplessness in the urban youth, because I come from the rural area. I come from New Zealand. I mean, sorry, from Northland, right, which is at the upper top of New Zealand, in a little town called Morawa in the Bay of Islands. And so for me to see that was quite weird, to see the sort of poverty, to see the sort of helplessness, like gangs, street gangs and stuff
yeah,
like that, which we didn't have. Like, what's a street gang? And so you had all these people, like one guy one night, I was just walking with my skateboard with my friends, and we're getting some stuff from a petrol station. And it's like about 9 o'clock. And the guy comes up to me, "You got a job?" I go, "Yeah, I've got a job." Because, my friend and I got it. Yeah. And he goes, "Oh, no, 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 you got a job." It's like, "Yeah, man, I got a job." And I walk away. And I go, and my friend goes to me, what do you want? I said, "He asked me if I had a job." Of course I go, "No, no, he meant that if you were a thief. If you're stealing,
Oh, if you're
right? You're on a job, mate. Have you got anything going? And I'm like,
right.
and that's not something, growing up rural, all these slang and stuff. But I found that, like, so we used to spend all weekend drinking, right?
Yeah.
And this is the helplessness about it. Like, you'd work all week and then you'd go and get screwdrivers. It used to be like cask of orange juice and vodka, right?
Yeah.
And a cask. So you'd like, and you just hang out with your friends and you get drunk and then you crawl home and, like, go to sleep and wake up vomiting or something. And the next day you're back at it.
Right.
And it's, and this is like a 16, 17-year-old kids.
Yep.
In the urban area. And that's not something heard of in the rural areas. We wouldn't do that. We'd go have a drink and that was it. Or get, have some green and then smoke and that was it. But not get blotto. And this felt like it felt like you were just doing it to get blotto, to forget stuff. But then I realized what they were forgetting, and there was all this trauma that was going on amongst all my friends. Like, not one of them did not have trauma in their life, and which was quite sad. And and that's why, like we mentioned about Once a Warriors being such a punch in the face. And I think one of the cool things is that, like, communities and I think the urban youth, like, we're celebrating hip hop right now, right? And being was it 50 years of hip hop? 50th year?
Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, Lael Rockwell, who I do Midnight Musings with, is back in Brooklyn right now celebrating. They're having all these events for the 50th anniversary of hip hop. So yeah.
And
so
that's for New Zealand, that's a huge thing, right? And but breakdancing influenced us so big in the 80s, early 80s. I mean, I had my friends breakdancing at my birthday. As a child, as a preteen. I think I must have been about maybe 11 or 12. And we had like the cardboard out, right? Fridge cardboard out there, and they were breaking on it. So we have like a huge love in New Zealand for hip hop music, and like you said, with the Freddies, that would be, they'd probably be influenced by hip hop easy.
Oh yeah, I mean, I didn't say that, but yeah, they have a hip hop influence. I mean, and it's funny because, again, in America, I don't think, especially with hip hop culture, there isn't an understanding of how big hip hop is around the world.
Yeah.
And how huge, because in America, things become what I really love about American pop culture when you go around the world is, in America, people are you have to listen to the right hip hop.
That's it.
Right. And when you go around around the world, it's all of it's embraced.
Yeah.
Like, you go to the UK or New Zealand, Australia, the Commonwealth countries or whatever.
Yeah.
There's such a love for all of it. Or you even go to the Middle East, and they're not worrying about whether this guy is cooler than this guy or this female rapper is better than. They embrace all of it because they don't understand there isn't sort of a hierarchy of, well, this is cooler than this. They embrace it all, and then they put their own spin on it. Right. And there's such a love for American pop culture around the world. And I think that's something else that America doesn't really understand, because, again, Americans are pretty insular. They haven't seen enough of the world. Right. And I always try and emphasize, it's not just enough to travel. I'm like, if you can, go somewhere where you can spend a month or two. Like, if you can, maybe get a short-term job or really immerse yourself in a culture, because it's so gratifying to do that. And I wish Americans did more of it, because it would help. It would help our country in immeasurable ways. And one of those ways is to see how important our pop culture is, that we just take for granted. Like, yeah, whatever.
I mean, like, you could just understand how your entertainment has influenced our culture.
Yeah.
Let alone Fiji, let alone the islands. I mean, hip hop is in Korea, right?
Oh yeah.
Hip hop is in, like you mentioned, Middle East. It's in Asia. You got Honey Singh, or whatever his name is. Hip hop. He's Indian, over in India, making this. Hip hop, right? So when I was in my 20s, I was doing rap, right? With a metal band behind me, So this is like what you would call metalcore, whatever it was now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I was doing that on stage because, as a musician and so, lyricist. And it's just, the culture, I think that's why I feel like really sad for Americans to say, oh, they hate America and stuff. I'm like, you guys really don't know how great you are as a nation and how greatly you have influenced everybody else in the West, let alone in the East and all that. But really in the West, like anywhere we were speaking English, we've been able to take on what you've created in a loving and caring way that we made a part of ourselves. Like you got the Decepticons. I want to show you this video that I've lined up. This is what I was talking about way back in the 80s, right, with hip hop. So this is Patia Maori. This is Patia Maori. So that's our culture there.
Oh yeah.
Indigenous Maori culture, right? This is from breaking, like
Oh yeah.
early 1980s breakdancing. Still loved song, right?
Wow, this is
Timeless.
classic.
Yeah.
And the roller disco behind him.
Yeah.
Here we go. Wow, this is awesome.
Yeah. So when you're a kid of the 80s, right, you grew up watching this, you're watching breaking, you're watching breakdance, you're watching
yeah.
the last Dragon, right? If I remember right.
I love The Last Dragon.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got Kiwis, Europeans, singing along. So you got someone it's just this is like, melding of American culture with European culture, with Maori indigenous culture, all mixed in with the music, and you can hear the dub, right? You can hear the dub from Africa.
Yeah. And you got the haka there.
Yeah.
The end. That was
so
good.
It's, when you see that meld, right, from all these cultures in New Zealand, you cannot not appreciate where it comes from.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I find, pretty sad about what I see coming out of America right now. And but because I have business there as well, but I also work with people there, through my being a director of Rising Sun Comics, and so I just feel kind of sad watching this all go down. Like you said, psyops, yeah, it's social media, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with lack of education.
Yeah.
And not really understanding that you need education and you need to be, learn about your culture, not with a negative view of it, but just of an open eye. And, like I remember realizing my own culture because I in 2005, for the first time, I realized that Indians weren't always from Fiji.
Right.
Right. At 2005, there's like, I'm 50 now, right? So this, about 18 years ago, I realized, it was my little brother, right, who's actually born in New Zealand. So he's actually, his dad's white, Kiwi, English, and my mum's Indian. So he's my half brother, but he's my brother, right? So
sure.
He tells me, hey, guess what? Did you realize that Indians were from? Oh, what? He said, hey, read this book. And so I did 5 years of research, right? 5 years of finding out about my Indian culture side of because, imagine being about 38 years old or something, 35 years old, and realizing that that your people are migrants to Fiji, and you're like the 5th or 6th generation of that, but you're also a migrant to New Zealand.
Sure.
And it opened my eyes up and made me realize how grateful I have to be for the sacrifices of my forebears that they gave up, right? This is like traveling across the ocean for months, right, to get to Fiji, not knowing where it was.
Right.
They just thought it was just over there.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And they just thought, oh, it's only a couple of miles over there. And these are Indians from mainland in the middle of nowhere, far away from ocean. They'd never seen the ocean, coming over, sacrificing to us their future children to have a better life. And you know, when you look at things like that as a migrant, you go, I'm so grateful for that. You
Yeah,
know, and
we don't. I wish like America. Not only do we have incredible amounts of self-loathing, but
mm,
we have our institutions, academia, colleges, or whatever, are actively working toward. They would love to see America dismantled. And
that's
again,
sad.
it's a product. It's something that we that has been injected into American
Mm,
culture in sort of an insidious, I think, an insidious way.
yeah,
And everywhere you look in America, there's some place, especially places, you know, higher education, that's telling you
yeah,
how terrible this country is, and
yeah.
how we victimize the world. And I mean, you can't change the fact that human history is full of
Oh
aggression and
gosh,
horrors, one culture visiting horror upon another.
yeah.
But you know that America
We
also
feed
has,
people, right? In New
yeah,
Zealand,
right,
right?
yeah,
In the
you're
Pacific
cannibals.
Islands. I actually have something that would, you know, a weapon of war, right? A weapon of war. Let me just get this one. A weapon of war, right? That our native Fijians used to use to clobber the heads of people, to knock them out and eat their brains. They had
Yeah.
forks. They
Yep.
actually have forks for eating brain, right? Pulling out the brains.
Oh yeah.
And this is a club. Was given to my granddad. This is jute, right? And I found it in my dad's, like my granddad must have brought it to New Zealand, and found it in my dad's backyard shed when we were cleaning it up about 2-3 years ago. And I went, this is coming home with me,
Oh yeah.
right? You know, and yeah, it's very light, and because it's light, it swings really easy
Yes.
to take your
Yes.
head off, right?
Yeah.
And it's wood. And I think people don't realize that like you said,
No. I mean,
there is so much that has happened in the world that people lack of education has taught them to not think about.
no. It's really unfortunate, and you see a lot
Mm,
of it in America. I mean, we're taught to be, especially now, everybody here in America feels victimized and oppressed. And
yeah.
it's something that has been, because that's the easiest way to divide a nation. You
Mm,
know, is to what is the easiest way to diminish the strength of the United States, is to tell the people that live here how awful we really are,
yeah.
rather than say that, you know, for everything we did, we also did stop slavery.
Yeah.
We put an end. And while, yeah, you can say that we were still
Mm,
racist and still are today,
yeah.
170 years later, we still put an end to slavery,
Mm,
you know, to chattel slavery that existed for 400 years in this country. And we
yeah.
finally put an end to it. So, and we're obviously, we're trying to get better all the time, but
Yeah.
it's a very weird place. I mean, I really thought America would be further along in I think that social media, the rise of social media, has really curtailed the growth of this country by about 30 or 40
Yeah.
years. And I do
Yeah.
think we'll get back on the right path eventually. But again, Americans are really great when the going gets tough. We suddenly smarten up and
Mm,
figure it out. But until then, we have to put up with a lot of nonsense. And you know what?
yeah.
Shout out to people like, I was so proud to see, and this can't be undersold,
Mm,
that the Indian space program successfully landed a lander on the south pole of the moon this week.
okay. I missed
Um,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and India became, let's see, so the United States, Russia,
Yeah.
China,
Hmm.
and I think now, is it India?
Incredible.
They're the fourth country in the world to land a probe on. There might be a fifth one, but to
Mm,
land, and not only did they land a probe on the South Pole, there's
yeah.
a possibility, and they did it far cheaper, with far less money and resources
Yeah.
than it would cost here.
Mm,
And if they discover water on the moon, it is a discovery that
yeah.
means so much to the future of humanity expanding into the solar system. So good on India, because it's really. And the same week that the Russians crashed their probe,
Yeah.
they had a probe that was going to land on the moon, and they couldn't do it. Their probe crashed. And it's amazing to think that India,
Mm,
an emerging economy, still the second biggest nation on earth after China.
yeah.
And this is a huge deal. And it's a huge, I think, wake-up call, especially for this country, because, you know, the Indians are putting in the time and getting the kind of education that we used to get here,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
Americans, I mean, our
Yeah.
population in 20 years is going to look around and go, what happened to this country?
Yeah.
And well, what happened to this country is you guys didn't go to school. You guys
Yeah.
didn't pay attention. You didn't get educated, and you got smoked by the rest of the world. That was and I mean, to see this, I mean, who knows when maybe India will get put men and women on the moon in a year or two.
Yeah.
We haven't
There
done
is,
it since 1972.
and I think that's like talking about the moon. We go into our favorite subject, right?
Oh,
Right.
there we go.
So
That's a great book, by the way.
Yep.
Mark
So
Altman and Ed Gross wrote that one.
the weird thing is, like, I have all this, but I've never read them. And you're probably going to go, why don't you?
What?
But it's, yeah, see? But here's one of the terrible things about, I think, my sidelines, because I'm always busy doing stuff.
Right.
And, you know, and like when I say, like, I've studied, you know, being a chef, did filmmaking, art school, you know, running projects, you know, conventions and all that, I don't have time. I don't even read comics anymore because I
Right.
haven't, even though, you know, just don't have time. And so when I'm working, I'm like watching YouTube videos, listening to people talk like yourself, like talk about pop culture and stuff, and I learn about history and stuff while I'm working. So like one of the great things about yourself is that I think you were talking, somebody was talking about audiobooks on one of my live streams, and I went, yeah, I should do that. I should actually listen to audiobooks. So I actually went, and I think I listened to Federation.
Oh my God,
because
it's so
after your
good.
suggestion, right? So this is the one with the soccer team with Kings, London Kings, and as a tribute, I decided to put London Kings into my first issue of my Incredi-Girl comic because one of the guys, because it was in England, right? And so there was one of the players were going to try out for a soccer team. So I went, I would put a little homage from that book into this to kind of tie into my love for Star Trek, and just that little 2 words, London Kings, right? And then I listened to that audiobook, and then also in there it mentioned about Changeling, and I went, where do I know that from? What do they look like? So I went and watched the episode. So I'm having this deep diving back and forth between like TV shows, audiobook, and so on. And
Yeah.
now I'm onto the audiobook. So if any of all these are like an audiobook, I'm listening to them from now on. But I think having, like, this is what I mean about American culture, right? This stuff came out in 66, right? All this came out in 66, right? Yet for me, Indian from Fiji, the chance that my mom got married to an Englishman from living in New Zealand in 1980, and I was able to come over here about 12 months later in almost 81. I got to sit down and watch Fantasy Island, A-Team, Knight Rider. I grew up on all this stuff, right? Star Trek, right? On Saturday afternoons, matinee time, right? My mom would go and visit somebody. I'd be there watching Fantasy Island and Star Trek. And Star Trek has been my love forever. That's the longest thing I've ever been in love with, because it's still going and so on. I hate New Trek. I despise it. I'll talk about that in a moment. But the whole Discovery, the fact that I don't know there were black people around the world, right? Because I'm from Fiji. All I know is that there's Fijians in Fiji, there's Indians, and there's a couple Asians, right? Right. When I was coming to Fiji, my couple old guys set me down and said, "Do you know that there are white people over there?" I'm like, "What do you mean white people? You're gonna have like to mix amongst them." That's a terrible thing to say to a young kid. You have to paint yourself silver so you mix in, right? And I'm like, already freaking out. Like, I don't know nothing about New Zealand. I'm going to be with my mom because my mom had already been here for a year. My mom, at that time was solo. And so coming over to Fiji. So I then was amongst Maori people, and a couple of them looked like me, right? Had my skin tone, like maybe lighter. And I'm like, oh, cool. This is not so bad, But my best friends were, Kiwis in the sense that Pakeha, which, Maori, but Europeans, right? And so I got to assimilate in a way where my best friend across the street was reading 2000 AD, and was getting me into comic books that way. I could watch TV, from England, right? 2000 AD from England. If you guys don't know what 2000 AD is, it is Judge Dredd.
Oh, and
Right?
Judge Dredd and DR and Quinch and
Yeah,
all of the
the classics.
yeah, that's so good.
And so I had that as my comic book feed. I had Asterix, Obelix. I had gosh, Tintin. From coming out of all those cultures, Europe and stuff. And then, of course, I had America, and I had Star Trek, and I had Uhura. Right, Uhura. I always get her name wrong. Right, and then I was like, wait, they have people that look like me in
Yeah.
space, kind of thing. And it was like an eye opener, right? And I think a lot of times this is what I'm grateful for because it's part of my soul, right? It's like Star Trek is the one thing that I can always look back and go, that's got me thinking about the world in a bigger way. Got my fantasy life, got my creativity flowing. That
Yeah.
now at 50, I'm writing sci-fi comic books, right? I'm working on I've done a story called The Trouble Bobo TM, which is a 16-page short story, which Indians in space, you know. So it's a young Indian family in space landing on Pluto. And without this, right, as influencing my childhood in such a huge way, I don't think I would actually be thinking about sci-fi. Maybe it was something else that influenced it. But the idea that Indians can now, like you said, landing on the moon, I don't think none of us would have feel that way or be adventurous if those guys. I bet you those astronauts watched Star Trek, right? I bet those guys. Some of them either watched Star Trek or Star Wars and thought, why can't we do it ourselves? And this is what I think a lot of things media teaches us. Why can't we do it as well?
Well, I think that's another thing that what I love about this pop culture, and we've seen it. I mean, you and I are not that far apart in age.
Yeah.
Over the last, I separated into the modern, call it geek. I say imagination connoisseurs. The modern geek era really began with Star Wars coming out. That we had media properties before. There was Star Trek and the Twilight Zone in 2001 and
Doctor
Planet of
Who.
the Apes and James Bond and all that stuff, but it wasn't. Oh yeah, Doctor Who. We didn't have and all like Jerry Anderson stuff, the Thunderbirds and UFO, but it was Star Wars that made it all mainstream.
Yeah.
And then we saw the imitators, and then all how Star Wars inspired all these other sci-fi fantasy related properties. And what's been really interesting over the last almost 50 years to watch is to watch how Flights of Fancy and all of this stuff did go mainstream, and how a lot of people were able to see themselves not just in Star Trek, but when other people came in, and you saw like, Ripley was a strong character in the Alien movies. And then you saw Sarah Connor in Terminator in '84, and then in '91 with Terminator 2, and then there were other like in the MCU. I mean, even Star Trek and Deep Space Nine had a pretty diverse cast. You had a lot of not just Avery Brooks as a black captain, but Worf as a black man playing a Klingon, and then you had Siddig El Fadil as or now Alexander Siddig as Dr. Bashir, and there were a lot of great female characters and a lot of great characters in the periphery of, and it was, and because the world embraced this, I think a lot of people have had representation that didn't normally, and like you were saying, that they could see themselves in, and no one ever thought. I remember Whoopi Goldberg saying that when she saw Uhura on the Enterprise, she realized, oh, there are black people like me in the future, because there weren't any. You look at science fiction films, even Forbidden Planet. There's no white. It's all white dudes. There's no black guys in Forbidden Planet. And it was really important to see that. And now all around the world, people are making comic books. They're doing making movies, and you can see everybody. I mean, in America, we still have a very, very small understanding of like the Indian film business. India has
Yeah.
the biggest film business in the world, and we
Yep.
barely get we get nothing.
80 like feature films a year minimum.
Yeah.
80.
And we don't see any of them. We
Yeah.
might get something like Robot, or last year we had RRR.
Yeah.
We'll get, and I remember like when Lagan came out in, I don't know, 25 years ago, it was a 3-hour movie about cricket.
Yeah, and I saw that, which is kind of weird because I don't watch Bollywood, but I
Right.
saw that, and I heard you mention the other day about that, and that is like, you look at like a a, a freaking movie about cricket, the most boringest game, and I played it. I played it.
Well,
Right?
I
Yes.
became a cricket fan when I came to New
Yeah.
Zealand. I went to cricket matches. The first time I ever
Yeah.
played was with the people at Weta. It was
Yeah.
great.
But you're standing out there for hours, and and waiting for the ball. I think I actually stuffed 2 fingers when I was trying to catch it, and I did catch the ball. This is like only 2005 or something like that. But I think to see a movie like Lagan come and talk about European and Indian culture in a way where I think, if I remember right, like the Indian lady, the European lady, English lady falls in love with the Indian guy, and they talk about the culture, the differences, they challenge each other. And I was actually, after that, I was writing a film script for some guy about cricket, and I was going to call it like Bend It Like Beckham had just come out,
Oh, right.
and I was going to call it Twisted Like Headley, like that was the call of it. And then like I got paid 500 upfront to do it, and it just fell apart and something like that. And I was like, just I think a lot of time people think they know about how to make film or write film, and they have this idea of it, but they don't know what the process of it, and they get lost amongst it. But I wanted to show you this because you mentioned DS5, right?
Oh,
So
look
this
at
is
that. Did
the
you make
Star
that?
Fury.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's
a
a
friend of Babylon 5, right?
yeah, that's a model. Is that I think that's the Revell model kit, isn't it?
Yeah. And
That's a
so
great kit.
I actually had a friend of mine's dad put it together for me because I wouldn't touch
Oh,
anything like this. I had it for about 15 years.
this is a
I take
hard
with me.
model to get, by the way.
Yeah. And it's like this, I'm going to be gentle here, but this came with a badge and everything, a little, like a JMS badge. And the reason I mentioned this is because we just had I talked about the other day on live stream, but we just had Babylon 5, Far Away from Home.
Yeah, the animated movie just came out.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I was, I just, I think it's to, like, I know that like Babylon 5 influenced DS9, right? And so, because you look at Babylon 5, the diversity there, but the great thing about that, you also saw the lower decks. People talk about the lower deck Star Trek, but you actually saw the lower decks in Babylon 5 where people lived in poverty, just scrounging to make a living on a
Yeah.
friggin' space station. For the first time, you got to see like a city, like in the world. I mean, in space, which basically Babylon was.
Yeah.
And I think all that stuff is just like such a, like, if we didn't have America, we wouldn't have that, right? We wouldn't have this history of sci-fi, these great writers and novelists, and just having the money behind it as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
To put it out, because how many people do we know around the world that actually put money into sci-fi?
No, I mean, not a lot. And because it's not seen as so much of the film businesses in other countries, like whether it's the UK, even Canada, has government funding going into those. So there is when you're trying to make films in foreign countries, there's a lot of, you have to have some kind of social message.
Yes.
Like how does this benefit our population? And I totally get that.
Yeah. I mean, I had to go for funding for arts for our convention, right? And we got paid, which is great. But like, it was like, how many people from which area are going to be there? How many Maori people are going to come? How many Pacific Island? How many Asian? I'm like, dude, I'm putting on a show, and the door's wide open.
Right.
Anybody can come in. I don't know who's going to come, but I will invite everybody. That's how I work in my life, right? My whole motto is, doors open. If you want to come in, come in. If you don't, it's up to you, and it's on you not to come in. But the door is open.
You know, when I got there, when I was in New Zealand, the Maori TV station had gone on the air. And there wasn't a lot of programming, you know, they didn't broadcast very much. And there was a lot of controversy behind, well, should we really be funding this if only this many people? I mean, how many people speak Maori and all that? And I remember thinking, well, how cool is it that there's even a Maori TV station and like broadcasting in Maori? I mean, and I'm like, I thought that was really cool, you know, and I'm sure there was controversy about, well, is this really worth the dollar? And I'm like, how can you put a dollar value? What if one Maori kid watches the Maori TV channel that was only on for a certain amount of time anyway, and he's inspired or she's inspired or they're inspired to go do something, you know, and who can put a value on that?
And that's actually made culture, the culture grow. Right in the Maori culture, it's like it's gotten like the whole. They've been able to have like, I mean, you can just watch it and see how much is on there, and then the only thing I had was like, please have subtitles, right?
Right.
I like subtitles even on my Bollywood movies because I don't understand the lingo they speak because we speak different Hindi. You know, we speak different Hindi in Fiji than they do in India. So please put subtitles even on Bollywood movies so I can understand the words you're saying. You know, and so like. They even had Bollywood movies on the freaking Maori channel, right? With subtitles.
Yeah.
And so you had Asian TV on there as well. So it because of, like you said, lack of local content in Maori culture, Maori language, they were able to get from other indigenous cultures and put it on there. So you actually got to see. The weird thing was, right, coming back to Northern and about 10 years after being away, people were like listening to Bhangra, right? With hip hop mix. And I'm like, oh, this is weird. Maori people listening to Indian music with Bhangra, you know, and I'm like, and dancing to it in the nightclubs. I'm like, strange, you know, and that was due to the fact they had the Maori channel and let people were able to, you know, see these different cultures on there. And you know, it works different, you know, people, and this is the thing about art. Art has different ways of reaching people in culture. It's a bit like food, right? You can sit down and eat a curry or you can eat sushi and you can suddenly learn about where that's come from, why they eat it that way. Why is it umami, you know? Why is it, you know, why is it raw, you know? And then you go, well, why is it, how come this have so much spices in it? Why is it so hot and stuff? And you learn about all these things. And okay, and then you go, well, why is it peppered steak, you know? And so on. And then you go, why do you put cream with mushrooms?
Right.
You know? And so you're learning about all these things, and it's such a cool way. I think music, art, and food has a way to cross boundaries and build bridges in our cultures. I was going to ask you about, because you talk a lot about physical media.
Yes.
I was going to show you this.
I was going to say, I was looking at that. That's
a couple years ago, right, on auction. And now it's the only thing that was missing of this was
the back
lid.
panel. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you had this goes in there, right?
Now, how many X-Men movies are in? I was looking at you pick that up. Like, I've never seen that before. Is that from Japan?
Oh, let me
because the Japanese used to do really awesome releases. Like they did a Planet of the Apes head, but they did an Alien. Look, I've never seen that before.
So let's say, let me just put this on full so I can show you properly here.
Yeah.
Give me one sec. That one. Nope.
There you go. Oh, almost.
Oh yeah, we had the right one. Okay. So it opens up, right? Where are we? So let me just put it all together again so it looks cool. So you've got like this.
Oh, wow.
So
it opens like the, oh, wow.
Right. So it opens there. Now it also, so it doesn't fall apart, right?
Right.
It opens there. Now, sideways. Cerebro.
Wow.
Inside the cerebro, that's the back. And now you have, and this cost me about $20 if I remember right. Right?
Wow.
$20, which is like about 10, 15 US dollars. So you've got that. Is it open?
I gotta
Like
find
that
out.
way?
I'm now
Two
looking
discs.
this up.
Yeah. So, and there, right? So you've got 2, 4, 8 discs in here, and this is X-Men, The Last Stand, Wolverine Origins, The Wolverine, Days of Future Past, and Legacy X, Wolverine and the X-Men. Oops.
Wow.
That's the
So
last one.
it's everything that had come out up to that.
Bryan Singer series, I guess.
Yeah, it's got X-Men X2, X-Men Last Stand, X-Men Wolverine, First Class, The Wolverine, and Days of Future Past. So it's got everything that had come up. Wow, that's really, really cool.
And you know, it's like it was sitting up on the shelf there because it's such an awkward, it's such an awkward little thing to have anywhere. And so, you know, it's you're saying what year who put it out?
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now. I've
gosh,
you know what? It was a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive.
Wow. So yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, I just wish it would have the last, the shelf that was in there, the case. It would be like complete. But
and it was also released in Czechoslovakia.
Wicked. So
wow.
Limited edition, I guess. But as a fan of X-Men, right? I mean, Claremont era and stuff, it's awesome to have. And I think
yeah, that's really awesome to have. Now I want it. Because I did the special features for X-Men and X-Men 2.
Right. So so the other thing I want to show is how how before we used to have amazing stuff like this.
Oh yeah, that's great too. Yeah.
You know, DVDs in a mask with a Batman, the Dark Knight.
Yeah.
My friend said the UV. I need to put some UV light on it to because the plastic is like rubber is coming off. So you've got that. Where else have we got here? Of course, that classic.
Yeah, that's great too. I love that.
And because I'm a huge fan of haven't even taken the stickers off, I got picked it up as a thrift shop. I've the director's cut of this. This is my favorite movie of all time. But on top of that, I was able to find this as well. And these are like becoming very expensive. Yet I was able to get this for a couple bucks. And,
wow.
Because I'm like thrift shop hunting now for whatever physical media I can get. And I'll be able to pick up this for $5.
Yeah.
Right. And this is the one with like
that's the first movie, right?
Yeah. And this one comes with that.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow. Right? So it comes with a disc.
That's wacky. That's really cool though.
And this is what streaming doesn't let you have, unless you buy really expensive.
Yeah.
So you've got an Optimus Prime with a disc of the movie, which is 2 discs. So yeah.
Wow, that's really great.
So with that finishing, I want to talk about Trekkies.
Trekkies, the documentary, or Trekkies people in general?
Trekkies, the documentary, and how that came about, because I did not know that you'd done it until I looked up your IMDb. I'm saying,
well, what? I'm in the second one,
right?
So what's really interesting. So I had known Roger Nygaard, who made that movie,
right?
And so I had directed Free Enterprise, and then Trekkies was coming out after Free Enterprise. And we actually changed, our movie was going to be called Trekkers, and Paramount was pissed at us. So we actually changed the title of the movie from Trekkers to Free Enterprise, so we didn't interfere with Trekkies. But when Trekkies came out, I mean, I really liked it. And then Roger contacted me and asked me if I would be in the second one, in Trekkies 2. Right. And Trekkies 2 went all over the world, or all around the world, to different Star Trek. And what was so fun about that, to be in that movie, was Denise Crosby came to my house. You know, Tasha.
Oh, dude, did you get her to sign everything you had that had
You know
Star
what?
Trek on it?
I didn't
Oh,
because I wanted to be cool. You know,
yeah.
and
I'm
but
never like that. I'm like, please sign.
oh
Done.
yeah,
Here you go.
yeah. No, it was so wild because she comes into our house
Mm,
and it's funny because my ex-wife we're all over the special features of that movie too,
yeah.
of the DVD, and it was really interesting. You know, it was the first time I really was able to sit down and talk to anybody that was on Star Trek besides, well, Shatner. You know, when we made Free Enterprise, I didn't talk to him about Star Trek.
Mm,
You know, because we were working as professionals, and I was
yeah.
directing him, and I'd written the script, and we'd raised the money, and he so that was. But Denise Crosby, I actually could talk to her about Star Trek,
Mm,
and she was delightful. I mean,
yeah.
um she was really, really great. And it was so much fun to be in that movie. And then this is really cool.
Mm,
In 2005, Roger, who directed both Trekkies 1 and 2, Roger and I were invited by the Icons Festival in Israel.
mm,
And Icons was a science fiction festival in Tel Aviv that was put on by, I think, the Tel Aviv Cinematheque. And then it was fan
mm,
produced with the university. And it was in the middle of I was in Australia working on Superman Returns, and there was a break in filming
mm,
for like a month and a half where we went away and then came back to Israel to Australia. So during that
mm,
time I went to Israel, and I went to Israel with Roger, and it was so great because he showed Trekkies and I showed Free Enterprise, and you know, we had to give lectures, and
mm,
it was crazy. I mean, it was so much fun to do that. And it's funny because in Los Angeles, you know, you're only as good as your last project, and
yeah.
if you haven't won an Academy Award, people are always like, well, what have you done in your life? And for me, I've had so much fun in
Yeah.
my career, like making a movie and then being invited to go to Israel to speak at this conference, and to go to a convention in Israel. Mark Altman and I, who wrote one of the books that you showed earlier,
Yeah.
he and I, we made Free Enterprise together. We were invited to the first that one. We were
Mm,
invited to the first Star Trek convention in Paris.
wow.
You know, and we went to Paris and spoke.
Yeah.
I mean, it was I can't I mean, I can't. It's hard nowadays to explain
Mm,
to people how much fun I've had,
yeah.
because I've had so much fun.
Yeah.
Like, God forbid, if my life ended tomorrow, I would have no regrets about
Yeah.
most things. And a lot of it had to do with Star Trek. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been able to go to Paris, go to Tel Aviv, you know, literally go to Israel, the Middle East,
Mm,
whatever, because of Star Trek and because of professional work that I had done.
yeah.
And it was great. And so it was a lot of fun. And Trekkies 2 is really a great documentary. I was so proud to be in it because it celebrated Star Trek's effects around the rest of the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
So it was really good.
I you know, I think it was like 2002 when the traveling show came to New Zealand. The Star Trek, you know, like it came to Te Papa,
Yeah.
and I missed out. But my friends got to go to it, and you know, and see it. I don't know why I missed
Is
out.
that the museum that's in Wellington?
Yeah,
So that's where I went, and they had the Lord of the Rings. That was across
yeah.
the street from where I was staying at the
Okay,
Duxton Hotel. I could see it from my window.
right.
I
It's
love
just
that
over
museum.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I'm like, there it is.
I can see Russia from my window, kind of.
Right.
But actually, in New Zealand, it is like that, right? It's just
Yeah.
there. Because we like compared to the rest, you know, you can basically we're quite a small country, so you can just drop us, and it'll be like, what? This is New Zealand, you know? Drop us in America, be like, oh, how big are you? Oh, like Manhattan or something.
Right. Yeah.
You know? But
California.
yeah, and I think it's just when I look at the influence of something like Star Trek, um, yeah, you can't really downplay that. You know, the way it's actually affected society, and how actually, I'm reminded of 2000 AD, how like when you look at the vapes now, when the original vapes came out,
Yeah.
there's a character called Robo Hunter who
Yep.
actually has a vape thing
Yep.
way back in the 70s, right, or early 80s, and now we are basically copying that. Then we had the flip phones. That influence came into through like the mobiles and stuff, and there's so much in our society that has been influenced by these early masters of sci-fi and free thinkers of and imagineers of our culture, of our world, who have basically been able to dream up such amazing ideas and also warn us against what could happen, right? Like
Right.
dystopia and stuff. If we don't hold people to account, especially leaderships, but also just how much technology has come in. And I was listening to you mentioned the Brandon Braga and gosh, who's the other guy that worked on Enterprise? And I watched them
Koto
talking.
or David Goodman or
No, the showrunners, the producers, the executives.
well, yeah,
So
and Rick Berman, and Brandon Braga were
that's the one.
Enterprise. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you record that one? I'm not sure. Did you produce that interview?
We did the documentaries for Enterprise.
Right. So that was the two guys just talking about it. And
yeah, we did that. So that was Brannon and Rick
Yeah.
Berman. And Rick Berman had produced all Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and then they co-created Enterprise. That was so I'll tell you something about that. That was it. I had produced the special features along with Greg Carson and Dave Parker for a movie called Valley Girl, a Nicolas Cage movie in 1983. And when we did that, we put Nicolas Cage and Martha Coolidge together, and we did a piece called In Conversation, where they were sitting across from each other and they just talked.
Yeah.
And
that's
I
the one I
figured,
was watching. Yeah.
Yeah. And I figured, man, wouldn't it be cool if we could do that with Brannon and Rick? And I suggested that. And Roger said, yeah, who I was working with, he was directing. And we asked him if we could do that. We went to Rick Berman's house, set up the shoot. It was a 3-camera shoot, and did that. We shot them talking to each other, and it was amazing to watch.
Yeah. I watched it after you talked about it, and I was like, man, it was so good. And here's the thing that has me cringing at Brave New World. So there's a part in this is a link for that that conversation. So there's a part where he says, in this ship, right? And I've got this in like without this on it, but I bought it anyway, right?
Yeah.
So they talk about how, and the captain's, because the ship's so small, in the captain's bedroom, whatever, they have to bend down because there's a bar going across, whatever they call it. I've bad memory because I have too many concussions. So, and this is what made my brain think why I can't understand the openness of, and why the ship doesn't make sense to me, of Brave New World. Why the whole thing doesn't get, it's like has no soul, because there is no, that ship couldn't exist.
No, yeah, you mean because it's so big. The sets are so big, and that's one of my big problems with modern Star Trek is you don't believe, like you're like, why is there so much open space in this ship?
Yeah.
There never would be this much open space in a ship, and they've made it like this. I mean, Pike's cabin has a fireplace in it. Why?
So this is a toy from like the bridge, right, from the original one. So when you look at that one and you look at this one, it makes sense,
right?
Because they're so small. And so, what is a fireplace doing there then? Right? Why can you have an open, whatever you want to, like all these, like how much space? This is freaking doesn't make sense. How does I try to watch it, right? I watched 3 episodes the first time last year when it came out, and then I was talking with someone. They said, okay, I'll give it another go because I liked it. I'll give it. I watched 1 episode. I went, what? No, I'm not going to force myself to sit down to watch this. I will not force myself to watch this just because it's called Star Trek. I will just go and watch the old stuff and I'll be happy, right? Because at least that way I know that Star Trek. This isn't Star Trek, and it's you can't, sometimes you can't, like for me, because I have a really bad memory because of concussions, so I can't articulate why something is wrong to me, but I can tell you, and I can feel it in my soul that it's wrong, in my heart that it's wrong, but I can't tell you why. Like you said, the fireplace, I didn't even notice that because it's just, I'm not even going to bother watching that, kind of thing, because I try to force myself twice to do it. But
Yep.
like before you came on, I put on the Critic this week on YouTube. They were running the Critic back to back each episode, and there's a part there that goes, if it stinks, don't watch it.
Right.
In episode 6, and I was like, yeah, why am I going to force myself to watch something that I don't like? And watch something? I don't have that much time to waste. I'd rather just put on YouTube and listen to yourself, or WD Pro, or Latino Slant, or anybody else, rather than watch this overproduced, useless piece of crap that they want to tell us a Star Trek. I'd rather not watch that than just watch somebody talk about Star Trek, right?
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Now, I enjoy listening to your observations, and because like I'm new to coming on and doing a weekly show, and I find that like sometimes when you listen to other people talk, you get reminded of what things that you forgot.
Right.
And I like the fact that because through you, I was able to learn about the books and actually appreciate the books.
Oh yeah.
And actually relive those moments. And I think this is what like personalities like yourself who have experienced and lived through, especially with the knowledge that you have and the traveling you've done, right? And talking about stuff like having come to New Zealand to work on something like this, another childhood thing, love of mine with C.S. Lewis stuff. And how did you get involved with that?
Well, you mean in terms of producing the special features? Or
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's sort of interesting. So when you live in LA and you're a fan, eventually, and this was really true of the 90s, there was people that either grew up here or they came here, and you all end up going to the same events. You go to the same screenings, you go to the same conventions, and you end up seeing the same people. And then you sort of become friendly, and everybody becomes friendly with one another. And there was a friend of mine named Michael Pellerin who I had met, and he started a company with a guy named Jeff Curdy. And then they worked with another guy named Phil Savanick. So the three of them, there's Curdy Pellerin, and they all worked out of Phil Savanick's company, TV is Okay. That was the name of his company. And Phil Savanick would produce like montages for the Academy Awards. And if there was, so they knew, they were very well connected. So I knew Michael was producing like box sets of special features on Laserdisc for Disney
right
through the 90s. And then, I had made Free Enterprise, and we're all bouncing around kind of in the same circles. And he asked me if I would come to work for his company because they needed more people to do special features. And the first thing that I worked on was the Fantasia anthology for Disney. And that was when Fantasia 2000 was coming out. We did a box set of special features for the original Fantasia. And so suddenly I worked for him. And I was also, I was working at NBC on the Sydney Olympics. I was making promos and commercials for the Sydney Olympics. And then he offered me a job full time. And I went to work for him full time, and we were working I worked on Snow White, and I worked on Tron. And then when he got the Lord of the Rings job, I was a big part of that. I was, traveling to London and going to New Zealand and interviewing the cast and crew. And, we were going to Weta every day and shooting. And it was just incredible. And another thing, so it was funny because people said, so I made Free Enterprise, but it didn't make much money.
Yeah.
And trying to get a movie off the ground is really hard. And at the same time, DVDs were exploding. So I was actually working for Disney. Then I was working for 20th Century Fox on X-Men, and I was working for MGM on Usual Suspects. So I was working for the studios, and it was really hard. You know, I had an agent, and I was going to these meetings. And when you're a filmmaker and you're trying to get a movie off the ground, you have to go and have all these meetings with these production companies, but they can't actually give you a job.
Right.
They meet with you to see who you are because maybe they'll fund something you'll make later. And I frankly, I just didn't have time. Like eventually you might have to, like, it seems silly, but I lived in East Hollywood, and to drive to Santa Monica to go to a meeting and drive back is like a 4-hour ordeal. And I was too busy, you know, and I was traveling to London to interview Christopher Lee for Lord of the Rings, or I had to go interview John Rhys Davies, who played Gimli here in LA. And at the same time, you know, it wasn't that I didn't want to make movies. It was just that when you work in Hollywood as a filmmaker, you realize how much incredible amounts of time and how much of your life is wasted meeting with people trying to get another film off the ground. It is the amount of waste that if they would just fund nowadays, if half the filmmakers in Hollywood were able to make the movies they're trying to make, Hollywood would be a much better place. Instead, they're funding the streamers are all losing money. What we need is more people like Jason Blum over at Blumhouse, they'll make $5 to $10 or $20 million movies, and they all make money. We need companies that are doing that rather than like making a $200 like Red Notice on Netflix. Why are they spending $200 million on this movie? Like, why? I understand
it doesn't make sense, does it? Like,
no, and I mean, I get it. Gal Gadot, Ryan Reynolds, and The Rock in a movie. But the problem is, where's your return?
Right.
You know, and why are you spending? Why not make $10 million films that are really interesting with new filmmakers that probably ultimately would get you more views, especially if they're good? Because Red Notice is just a generic action movie that's not as good as the movies that a studio would make. And it was very frustrating.
Like it's a paint by numbers. I remember when I was doing film school, and it was just like, oh, you got to have stereotypes in your movies. I'm like, well, yeah, it's a shortcut. It's like, but then it does, you know, it's like you can have so many movies with stereotypes, and it doesn't get you anywhere. And I think you're right about Blumhouse. Like, you know, they do movie, couple, you know, if you can produce like Bollywood does 80 movies a year on a very low budget, with hardly much CGI, because a lot of time, like most of your post-production is where the cost is, right? But then also you got your post-production, and then you've got star power. But like there are not really any star powers anymore. You've gotten rid of like directors who are the visionaries, and you've put executive producers in. So I remember like somewhere along the line there was like, from the executive producer of such and such, that was the death of the director, you know, the visionaries. I think that's when it happened. And when the moment the studio decided that they were the artist, they were the creator, they were the storyteller, that's when, you know, the whole change from being the director with the vision and the storyteller of the book, that's when I think it died. So there's something that T. Alley mentioned here. It goes, Star Trek has such a wholesome mythology that you can make instant friends. I saw someone wearing a TNG shirt at the grocery store, chatted with her, and boom, instant friends. And the second part to that comes with this one here. Fans of the new Trek are not very friendly, sadly. So one thing, the other day, talking about meeting people at the grocery store, I was wearing, I had my Batman $2 auction, op shop bought Batman backpack, where I took to grocery store, and like the lady there, it was about 40-ish, goes, "Oh, Batman, I love Batman." I said, "Oh yeah," goes, "Yeah, because he's got no superpowers. He's just smart,
right?
Because I love him because he's so intelligent and he doesn't need all these powers and stuff, and I love him." I said, yeah, I love them too. I have all, I collect a whole bunch of stuff about them and books and all that. And she goes, yeah. I go, yeah, I also write comic books, and I'll let you know when I've done one. I'll bring one over so you can have a read, when we get it in print. And it's like, this is, the friendliness of people our age who've grown up on pop culture that have been with it for decades.
Well,
And I
I
think,
think. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, you carry on.
Well, I was going to say, I think what's happened now, the difference in our society is that nowadays, if people like something, their personal identities are very wrapped up in that thing.
Yeah,
And the reason, like, if like modern Star Trek, obviously on one hand, it's given a lot of people see that they personally are represented by
yeah,
that show.
yeah,
And like when I was watching Star Trek, I wasn't looking for myself in
no,
Star Trek. I was looking for people that I aspired to be one day.
exactly,
Like, wouldn't
100%.
one day I would love to be like Captain Kirk. And
Yeah,
I knew I wasn't going to be Captain Kirk because he's a fictional character. But
yeah,
the idea that you could travel through life with two good friends that would always tell you the truth about yourself,
exactly.
and they had your back and you had theirs,
Mm,
and to have those were the people that you knew.
mm,
I'm like, that's the kind of world I want to live in. And to
yeah,
me, to boldly go is not to like dream about going to outer space. To boldly go is like to go to New Zealand,
yeah,
to go to Israel if somebody invites you, to go to France, to go work on a
yeah,
project, to move out of your comfort zone
mm,
and go somewhere that you might not have thought to ever go to. And um, that's what I learned from Star Trek. But now people take it personally. Like when I criticize, like
mm,
people don't understand. I'm like, look, I have a hard time watching Star Trek now because, like we were talking about earlier, the sets do not convince me what I'm watching is real. There's
right.
no way that if they built a starship in the future that they would waste so much space
Yeah,
on a ship that has, I mean, anyone that's been on any kind of a vessel knows that human habitable space is
submarines.
it's submarine. I mean, and so when I
Yeah,
watch something like this and I get
yeah,
angry about it, people are like, well, Rob, why do you care? And I'm like, I care because ultimately it's making us stupid
yeah,
because we're looking at these things, these pie in the sky things, and we don't have an understanding
mm,
of what it means to exist in that kind of a world.
yeah,
And I think that the great thing that I loved about speculative fiction, Star Wars, Star Trek, or whatever,
mm,
but great sci-fi made me believe in it.
yeah,
It taught me something about science, or it taught me something about something. And now I watch modern Star
mm,
Trek and I'm like, none of it, I don't believe it. I don't believe
yeah.
any of it. I don't believe the people. I don't believe. So it's hard for me to
Mm.
accept it or even watch it.
They've taken away the possibility part of it. It could be possible, and they've told there's kind of like li- it just feels like unnatural to go from Star Trek, especially when you're trying to set it up in that same universe as like original series, right? And you want to say, well, this is what it should be, and you go, well, but why don't they look like those people from that sort of era? Why don't they dress that way? Or what is it about these? How come they're discovering all these new planets all of a sudden that didn't exist in this? It doesn't make. It's really hard to kind of like contemplate where they actually where what they think we should be expecting. It's like they're preaching down to us, and like here it is. You must accept this, which like that wasn't like that with the original series, and even TNG or Enterprise or DS9. It wasn't like accept or you're not part of this fandom. And I think if that's what you want out of that, I'm like, well, I'll stick to my fandom over here, which is the old stuff,
Yeah.
and I'm like, and at first I felt like I was the only one who felt like that because we're so far away from US, so we don't get to see what you guys actually get to go to, like Star Trek, conventions and stuff. I've never been to one, so it's so far away. But you get to mix and mingle with people in that same fandom. I've never had a chance to do that. But then like T. Ellie just said before, that you can just make a friend because someone else is in Star Trek. Now, what we see now is like what I find is like there is a us and them, and I don't know why it's become that way, but maybe because there's this thing like, well, it's because it's old, and we must let the old die, kind of motive,
Right.
like with Star Wars. But it's like you can't let go of the if you forget the past, and there's that whole idea, if you don't know where you come from, where are you going to go? And
Yeah.
so these guys don't know where they came from because they never, like you said, they haven't read anything. They haven't come out of sci-fi. They haven't actually watched any of the shows. They're just making up whatever they think of. So that's why they don't know where they're going. And that's why it feels unnatural to me, whatever they've come up with that.
I
Getting back
agree.
to
I agree with that.
Blind the Witch. So what was it like? I saw you like coming did you go onto set when they were doing that, or did you do that afterwards with the
Oh
special
no,
features?
we were okay. So this is really interesting. On Superman Returns and Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe, we were embedded in the production, so we were
Right.
there every day they shot.
Oh wow.
We were on set every single day, and it was really fascinating. It was really, really, really interesting. And I had a team of people. I had 2 other guys working for me, and I hired somebody locally in New Zealand. And so there was 4 of us total, and we were shooting all day, every day.
Wow.
And it was a lot of fun. It was fantastic. And it was directed by Andrew Adamson, who is a Kiwi. He directed Shrek.
Right.
And it was, what was really interesting about, and you saw this on Lord of the Rings too, that there was such a national pride because the projects, the first thing we did was I went to a haka. I went to the blessing, the Maori blessing.
Yeah.
They had to bless the production. And that was really fascinating to shoot that. I was that was the first thing, actually the second thing I shot on the movie. And it was really terrific. And it was really inspiring. And it was, you never know, like I had never been like Oamaru, which is on the South Island. It's in the middle of the South. It's on the coast. It's this total small town. And we lived they found a room for us at this little motel. And this couple, these 2 guys, they ran the I forget the name of the name of this place, but it was 20 years ago. But they were great. Every morning they're like, what do you mates want for breakfast and stuff? And I being in Oamaru was great because you could walk down and there's like it was like almost like a 40-foot cliff that was just dropped down to the beach all the way down. And there was a restaurant, like a pub called Fat Sally's.
Okay.
And you'd go down, I don't know if it's still there, but like there would be hundreds of penguins coming up from the ocean, and Tilda Swinton would come down and drink with everybody. And it was because in New Zealand, I'd never heard the term tall poppy syndrome before, which is poppies grow tall and people think and that's, you get cut down.
And you got to knock them down.
You got to knock them down. And I'd never heard that. But the thing about New Zealand, what I loved about New Zealand was how everybody would help. There was that. I'll tell you another story. So I was in Wellington and I got invited to go play cricket on a Sunday. And everybody, we were supposed to show up at 10 a.m. We were going to play the first inning. Then we'd cook up lunch and then you'd play the second inning. Well, in Los Angeles, if you invite people to show up someplace on Sunday at 10 a.m., half the people you invited would show up. Everyone else, the other half will flake.
Yeah.
In New Zealand, everybody showed up and everybody showed up on time. And then we start playing, and this was the craziest part. So as soon as the first inning was played, everybody goes to their cars. Everybody bought a grill. Everybody brought like fresh seafood and charcoal and we're doing a fry up or a cook up, whatever you want to call it. And everybody was making it was amazing. It was just like, and this, I was like, wow, this is not what would happen in Los Angeles. And then we played, and everyone made fun of me because I wanted to bat like baseball, but I figured it out. And it was so much fun. And I was like, wow, I wish that Los Angeles was more like Wellington was.
Mm.
But it was. It was
I
great.
think it's that small community thing that comes in it. Like I
Yeah.
think slowly I think we're losing that, but I think we're coming back to it. The tall poppy thing, right? So the tall poppy is that the idea that you don't stick your head up too high,
Right.
and when you do, you get knocked down. And a lot of that has destroyed a lot of creativity in New Zealand, where we haven't been able to keep our great talents, and we haven't like, sort of like when you have like say something like George Lucas, right? Once you realize he's George Lucas, you put more money in it, more money in it, more
Right.
money. What do you want, George? What do you want? What's your next project?
Yeah.
Here
Yeah.
we'll be like, so made your name for yourself, eh?
Right.
And it's just kind of like it's kind of downside. So like it's kind of like, but the other thing is that you have other people trying to take you out, like because they want to get that place, and it's like rather than be supportive of each other to
Right.
help each other get forward, it's like okay, now that you've done your piece, I'm gonna get and take that over. And like I've had that in my own life, like I opened up a shop and suddenly everybody else wanted to do the same thing, and then it was like okay, now nobody's got a shop, right, in pop culture, so there's no
Right.
comic shop now because like well there's only so much somebody can have out of if you're opening up a niche shop in a city.
Yeah. How many people can open these shops?
Right. And so a lot of time that ignorance has actually hurt the economy, had hurt the fandom,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people think, well, if somebody's successful, I can do it too, but not doing the work to get to do that. Like you
Yeah.
look at you talk about Lee Tamahori and stuff, with Once Were Warriors, and then you also, you look at gosh, what's his name? That's terrible Thor movie that I didn't even want to watch, but
Oh,
Ragnarok was great.
Taika Waititi. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you like he made a whole bunch of short films and did I can't even remember what was he
And I
did
mean,
that
I'm a
mega-
fan because he made
yeah.
in New Zealand, he did What We Do in the Shadows, which I love.
Yeah.
And he did he did a lot of other things. He made that movie the oh god, it's called Hunt for the Wilder People. I loved
Yes.
that.
That was
I thought
fun.
that was
Yeah.
great. I thought that he did a fantastic job
Hmm.
with those movies. And now he's an Academy Award winning director.
Yeah.
And so he's got
And then he's gone, but basically he got woke and and lost his his I think his grassroots stuff, like
yeah.
where he came from and what thing. And I think this is also when you lose that grassroots aspect of your where you've come from, and you suddenly like went to Hollywood, right? And suddenly you're a Hollywood person, and you have that like that whole stars in your eyes kind of thing, and you've forgotten what got you to where. I think you lose that sort of na- um, natural creativity because now you got people throwing millions of dollars at you, and you forgot what it was like to make like a movie on a shoestring budget.
Well,
And
it's
I think
interesting too. He used to be, his name is Taika Cohen.
right.
So, and
But
then he decided to go adapt a Maori last name because his father was Jewish, I guess. And then he's like, I'm gonna embrace. And I'm like, well, that was a calculated move.
of course,
and I don't begrudge
like
him
Whoopi
for
Goldberg,
that.
right? Yeah,
Right.
like Whoopi Goldberg.
Right.
It's like we'll change our name and we'll do it because it's gonna get us the the little push that we need.
Yeah, which it's fine, but you've got to remember it's I mean, I don't look, I thought he did, like, I was knocked out by the What We Do in the Shadows and the TV show is great, but the movie was great. I thought that was really clever, and he is really funny. And I think that I really liked Ragnarok, but I hated Thor: Love and Thunder.
Yeah, I didn't watch it.
Oh,
But my sister went to see Ragnarok 3 times at the cinema, 3 times, because she loved it, because there was so much, and I loved it as well. There was so much Kiwi humor,
right?
and you hear, like I was talking to Paulie last week, like you can hear the accent and everything coming across, especially when he does the rock guy.
Oh, Korg, that was
and Yeah.
And I loved it for that. And I loved, you know, he was able to really balance the humor and the seriousness, because I mean, Asgard
Yeah.
gets destroyed, Odin dies, there's all this stuff that happens, but at the same
Yeah.
time, there was the humor, but it still worked. And you know, I like I remember seeing in the trailer when Hulk, Gladiator Hulk, comes out and he's like, "Oh, it's a friend from work." I was like, that to me was hilarious. And I guess
Yeah.
some kid was on the set and suggested that line, and they used it, somebody visiting the
Mm.
set. And I was like, I love that. I mean, I just thought Love and Thunder went too far. It was
Yeah.
like, okay, he's won his Oscar now, so he can do whatever he wants. And I'm
Yeah.
like, nah, you still need to be checked. You
Yeah.
still need to.
And I think that's missing right now is people not being checked.
Yeah,
It's like in New Zealand we have this saying amongst amongst the males, pull your head in, mate.
right,
Pull your head in,
right,
mate. That's checking. It's like when you realize that your mate's just stepping out of line, not like maybe he's being a bit too aggressive or something. Hey, pull your head in, mate. You know,
right.
and that's how we check our guys. It's like if somebody's saying that you got to go, why is he saying? And then you go question, and you have a time to think about it, and then you can like go, oh, I understand now. Because I've got someone who's like watching my back, because I could be going down the wrong way. And I think that's basically what's wrong here in the pop culture scene right now with the TV and shows. It's like, okay, you got your Oscar, right? But nobody's there to say, oh, well, I can't tell him anything because he's got an Oscar. He's got all these millions behind him. I could get fired if I don't say anything. And now we get rubbish like Love and Thunder, and we get a lot of rubbish like all this stuff out of Disney. But I think that's the thing. It's like when you start winning accolades, there comes a time when you forget, right?
Yeah,
And you don't have anybody to check you, and nobody there going, hey, to Tiger going, mate, pull your head in. You're just a
right,
bloke like all of us, right?
right.
And this is something that we have, like, like the whole top poppy. It's not about. I think sometimes it can be a negative thing, but can like, come on, mate, let's go for a
Yeah,
drink at the pub, right? Let's go have a drink. Let's talk about what's going on in your life, right? And let's settle down and say, okay, so you're having issues or something. Okay, let's talk about it. And I think that part of our culture is slowly getting deteriorated with the woke feminism kind of thing coming in the sense where it's like wrong to be mates, like have your mates, hang out with your friends, guy mates, without kind of being seen as something sexual or something like that, where you
right.
can't have just two blokes just chatting away about something. And it's something like, I remember, like, it's a biblical thing, right? Iron sharpens iron, right? And it's the same thing as like pull your head in, right?
Sure.
Checking in, friends. Did
Yeah,
you
no, absolutely.
did you experience anything interesting about our culture when you were here in New Zealand? Something that stood out, and he's like, "Wow!"
Okay, okay.
Apart from the haka,
I'll tell you this. Your culture, you guys are kinky. You New Zealanders, man, you guys know how to party. And the girls are not afraid to and I was married at the time, so I had to be like, yo. But you guys like to get down and dirty. I'll just leave it at that. That surprised me. I was like, I thought you guys were kind of a buttoned up Commonwealth culture, kind of like one step removed from the Brits.
Puritans. Yeah,
No, no, you guys are you you guys are very warm, and
yeah,
you guys really like to have a good time. Put it that way.
yeah,
More than I would have expected,
yeah.
because you don't. I did the first night I was in New Zealand. This was by myself, so I
Mm,
came down to work on Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I came down to shoot the haka, the ceremony, the opening
mm,
ceremony. And I was on the waterfront in Auckland, just wandering around, and I was looking for a place to stay, and my wife had found us this apartment, and it had like 4 different bedrooms, and it was great because it had a rooftop right on the water, and it had a rooftop like we could hang out there, and then it had like an
mm.
office, so we could
Right,
set up an edit bay, and it was a great place. And I went down there to check it out. And there was some kind of festival going
right.
on the waterfront there at the Auckland Marina or whatever.
Mm,
And it wasn't a carnival. It was like a bunch of different like food places had set up booths and stuff, and I go
Right.
down there, and these two women, these two women, like, they came up to me, and it was so funny. They're like, "So are you like a movie star or something?" And I'm like, because I was wearing like a linen jacket, and they were
Yeah.
pretty attractive women, but they were like,
Yeah.
they were older. They weren't like young.
Yeah.
And I started talking to them, and they're like, "Oh, you're an American." I mean, these two women were, but they were like, "Why don't we take you to this party we're going to later?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay," and one of these women was she was saying to me, I'd never heard this before. She goes, "What I really need is an oil and lube job," and I'm like, "For your car?" Like, because I didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah.
And then I should have known, but they took me to this amazing party, and I
Yeah.
was like their American friend that they picked up on the waterfront.
Yeah.
but it was
On their
like
walk. Yeah.
yeah, and this was a pretty, I mean, it was like going from 0 to 60. It was an awesome time. I mean, I had a
Yeah.
great time. But I ended up staying out all night with them and all night with these people, and like the
Mm.
sun's coming up and everyone's still like, maybe we'll have one more drink. And I'm like,
Yeah.
are we really gonna have one more drink? Okay. And I remember they drove me back to my hotel, and I was like, I think I slept for 18 hours.
Yeah.
Something, and I'm like, I love this country. And so, but that was how I was really surprised at how warm and inviting everybody
Mm.
was. I mean, there was and nobody really even cared that I was there to work on Lion, the Witch, and
Yeah.
the Wardrobe, because it really hadn't started shooting yet, so no one really
Yeah.
knew much about it. They just loved the fact that I was an American in
Yeah.
Auckland. They're
Yeah.
like, we don't know why are you here again? They're just like, and that they would introduce me as the American. The American's here. It was so funny, and I loved it, man. But that was, and it didn't matter
Yeah.
wherever I went. It was kind of the same thing. Everybody, because I was pretty interested. Wherever I'd go, I'd ask people like, where should
Mm.
I go here? Where should I? And I didn't make any, like, I just want to go meet people and do cool things.
Yeah.
And with that attitude, everybody in New Zealand's like, well, come over here. We'll take you this. That was the thing.
Yeah.
In America, if somebody says they're going to do something, especially in LA, the chances that you'll hear from them is 50-50 at best. But in New
Yeah.
Zealand, if somebody says, hey, let's go do this, that means they're going to call you up and go, okay, we're picking you up at
Yeah.
8:00. I'm like,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And that was the
Because
thing that,
yeah, you can't be rude about that, because once you've given your word, you got to fill it, right?
yeah, but New
And
Zealanders are really good about that.
yeah.
And another thing, I'll tell you something else that really surprised me. When you went to the beach, there were signs that said how many fish you could take out of the ocean.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised at how strict New Zealand is. And I understand why, having been there, how strict you are about your environmental
Yeah.
protection. And I thought that was really, I was very impressed by that.
Mm.
And what was really interesting is New Zealand did not allow American nuclear vessels to dock.
Right.
Like, none of our naval vessels that had any kind of nuclear power were allowed to dock in New Zealand. The downside of that is I couldn't buy Monteith's Black in America, because Americans would make sure that, well, we're going to tax the shit out of New
Yeah.
Zealand products, so they're too expensive to sell to America. And that
Yeah.
was like punishment for not letting our nuclear vessels dock
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
and I thought, well, that was kind of lame. I mean, they're trying to protect their environment, and I was really taken aback by,
Mm.
and I loved it too. I loved seeing that if you're going to take these kinds of fish out at this beach, you are only
Yeah.
allowed to take like 2.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that makes sense.
And they have to be the right size,
Yeah, and they have to be
and because you don't want to be fishing smaller fish, because then they can't grow to the big fish. They
Yeah.
can't, repopulate the ocean.
Yeah, they can't. And I'm like, I was very impressed by that.
Hmm.
I thought that was very impressive. And because we could certainly use that in the United States.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed by pretty much how clean New Zealand was.
Mm.
It was very, I mean, because everybody watches out for the environment, and also
Yeah.
how many damn sheep. I mean, I've never seen
Yeah.
so many sheep in my life.
Yeah.
And it was incredible. But again, you really felt like people were taking care of the natural world.
Mm.
And we need that. But that was just part of your normal life. It wasn't like you had to work
Yeah.
hard at it. It was, everybody took that responsibility in.
I remember like when I was like in my early teens, we had a thing we call keep New Zealand green, keep New Zealand clean. It was a huge push, Gen X now, but like back then, this was like around about 85, 86. So we actually cleaned the roads. So like the students, right? High school students, as part of our high school thing, would be like, okay, you will be on this road on this day. We will take you there. And I was lucky because I lived on that road, right, between our townships. So I just walked out and went, okay, we went there. But like we had to still go to school and then be driven back to there. And like 5 of us will go pick up rubbish along the road.
Right.
And I'm not sure if anybody else ever did that, but this was in 1980s. And so when I look at it now, I go, well, what happened to that us? I mean, like the suburban areas, like are very, are getting a bit messy, especially with a COVID mask. Like I see COVID masks everywhere now, that people have thrown away. And that because I'm a recycler, right, by nature,
Right.
because of the way I've been brought up. So like I will wash, like if I buy a pack of meat, I'll wash that plastic and then I'll put that into the recycling, right? Because it'll go to, be recycled. But then, I see rubbish blown around the road because somebody hasn't put it into a bag or something. And I kind of go, well, have we missed something in this generation, where we have stopped telling them to keep New Zealand green? Or
Yeah.
keep New Zealand clean, because that's what we were taught, like in the 80s, was like keep New Zealand green, keep New Zealand clean, keep New Zealand nuclear free. That sort of was part of our ethos. And so we really care about environment. And then suddenly it hasn't been that. But like when you see movies like Lord of the Rings and you go, why can't we keep it beautiful like this, And so, because then what that does is for the economy is bring in all the tourists, right? It makes people go, wow, it is as green and as beautiful as it showed us on the on the movies and stuff.
Right.
And there was this other thing we had, Pure New Zealand, which is like keep New Zealand like pure, like from like chemicals and stuff, and
Yeah.
and like spraying and all that. So I think I'm talking about the kinkiness of us. It's like we're quite conservative in our views, but we also center left, right? We're not
Right.
far left and we're not far right. We're
Right.
just center left. So
Yes.
we like to be left alone to do what we love, as long as we're not harming anybody. Just leave us alone. And that sort of brings us into a huge, like, welcoming community thing. So you could actually have people who are very conservative actually hanging out with very liberal people. And so you get to switch over with conversations and you get to learn from each other at the same party, right?
Yep.
And you'd have hippies, greenies, you'd have like people who are like capitalists or conservative, on the right end, whatever. But they're there having a drink, eating weed chocolate, whatever, and enjoying themselves over a bottle of wine or beer and whatever. And it doesn't matter, they have deep conversations or they don't, they're dancing. But I think when I look at America, I go, well, they're so divided. It's like, okay, only on that side and only on that side you go to a party. So there's no mixing. And I think so much was, even though they say we're progressing, it doesn't feel like we're progressing at all over there. It's like, like feels like it's regressive.
Yeah, when I moved to LA in '88, you still had the Crips and the Bloods were killing each other and the gang but what was really interesting to me was because I lived in Seattle before that, and we didn't have a big Latino community. Like we didn't have a lowrider culture. And I was really into when I first got to LA, I wanted to, I went to places where there was like gatherings of lowrider guys who were painting the cars. And I loved to see what they were doing. And I really, I love that. And what was really interesting was when I'd show up to these places, I was like sometimes the only white dude there, and people would come up to me and I would say, oh yeah, man, I just moved here and I always wanted to see what the lowrider culture was about. And everybody would be like, oh really? And then they would come and they would take you under their wing and as long as you were there to show respect. you know,
Yeah.
and like I would spend a long time, like I was asking a bunch of questions, and I'm like, okay, a lot of what was painted on the cars, the artwork had meaning beyond what it
Yeah.
was, you know, and I wanted, well, what does this mean? And who first came up with this? And once you got, it was very funny. I live in a place that's east of LA now, about an hour east of LA. And when I first moved here, I was just driving around. It was I think I was picking up something for the house at our Home Depot, which is it's where they sell like pipes and paintbrushes, and wood and stuff.
Yeah,
And
like Bunnings for us. Yeah.
yeah. And I saw this awesome lowrider car.
Wow.
And I stopped and I got out to look at it, you know, and I'm looking at it, and these two guys come over to me, you know, and they're pretty hard dudes. These are big dudes. And they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, dude, this car is awesome. And I started looking at it. I'm like, the paintwork is amazing. And then they were like, oh, like at first, like, was I going to steal it? Was I going to key it? And I sat there for like 2 hours with these dudes, and he opened up the engine, and he was pointing to showing me like, okay, this piece was stock. And I went to a junkyard and found this. And I sat there and these two guys suddenly, I mean, they could have beat the shit out of me, but they turned into little kids talking about their favorite thing. And the guy who owned the car was like, this is his pride and joy. And they let me, they didn't take me for a ride, but they let me sit in it. And he showed me that I got this kind of leather, and it was because then you realize, and this is what I've learned, you know, when you go out like this and you find people, it just depends how you approach them. And even the people, I mean, there's a lot of bad people in the world. I'm not naive about that. But for the most part, you can defuse a situation by showing another person respect or kindness or even interest. Sometimes people are desperate to tell you what they're interested in because no one's ever asked them. You know, and if you just ask somebody, what is it you dig, man? Like, is this your thing? Tell me about it. What is this? You know, and the more, and you know, you can't just fake that. You have to be genuine, because people can tell if you're being, oh, so tell me about this, and you're looking around or checking your watch, or so tell me about this car, and you're looking at your phone. I mean, no, you have to look people in the eye, and you have to have a genuine interest in them, so they know you're sincere. And but once that happens, man, you can talk to anybody. You know, you can ask them about whatever it is, and people want to share. You know, they want to celebrate whatever it is, and everybody's into something.
Yeah.
And
isn't
I
it like cars or comic books, right? We all have a hobby or have a passion about something.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I actually have to go.
Yeah, you've got a 4 o'clock, which is about very soon for us here. Which
and I gotta go feed. I gotta feed my dogs.
Right. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to. You were able to jump in. I was like a bit worried, so I was like,
well, I thought you wanted me to come at 6. You know, and I didn't realize. Was it 5 that I was supposed to be on? I apologize.
Yeah, it's fine. I think it's because, like, I have this problem with a lot of people, some people, because of the time. Because sometimes it's 19 somewhere hours ahead, and sometimes it's 18 hours.
Right. Yeah.
And so I always go, well, check both links so you can, you know. But yeah, I mean, I've actually missed out completely on an interview because of that whole change. I thought it was tomorrow. You know.
Yeah. Right. And because you guys are across the international date line, so.
Yeah, 19 hours ahead, I think.
Yeah.
Or maybe 18 or something.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate it, Robert. I thank you.
Oh, this was so much fun, man.
I'm just so glad, that you enjoyed your time in New Zealand. And really, it's so good to, talk to you about your reflection of our culture.
I loved it. You know, I loved it. And I was there for a long time. You know, I mean, I was there on and off for really 2.5 years.
Wow.
So it was a lot of fun, and I loved it. I miss it. I mean, I haven't been back since 2004. So it's been almost 20 years since I've been in New Zealand, and I'd love to go back, you know.
Well, make sure you come to the northern area, Northland, and I'm sure we'll show you an amazing time up there.
Oh, I will. Yeah, I'll look you up, man.
That's something that we're trying to sort of get set up here, especially with my friend here, right, with his book. Wherever it is with us. So Mike right now is trying to get some money together to put one of these short stories into a movie.
Oh yeah.
Right? scripted the thing, so he wants to go that route. And I'm like, because of my background in filmmaking, I kind of like want to push that into the forefront for our northern area.
Oh yeah,
and to
for
promote
sure.
our area more, because I think, you know, you got Auckland and you got South Island or Maroon, all those places, but we in Northland itself, Whangarei, Bay of Islands, we really haven't seen anything take off film wise. So it'll be great to have someone like you visit us sometime in the future.
Oh, I'd
and
love
go,
to. I'd love to come
yeah,
back down there you guys used to have a pretty great pop culture convention in Wellington.
yeah. Well, there's like, sadly, there, I was talking about this earlier about there's one in called Armageddon, right? Which
Yeah,
is
yeah, that's what it was. That's
on.
right.
So this year in October, they have no comic people. So no comic artists or writers, and it's all TV and movie and voice actors, right? And it's like, what? But the thing was that, like, the San Diego Comic Con, I think this year, had none of that, but only had comic people, and they said it was the best one they've had in years.
Oh
And so that
yeah.
was pretty cool. So it's kind of a loss, because, you know, that's where I got to meet Peter David and got him to sign this, right? And, you know, and so not having that sort of comic book side of things coming, it's a huge loss to us,
Yeah.
because we have such a vibrant uh, comic book culture starting up, and has been here, but like really, you know, Kickstarter and all that, and Facebook and all that has allowed us to actually get into self-publishing and get our comics into the, you know, into the global, you know, internet. I mean, like, global market, whatever. And
Yeah, yeah.
but, you know, and that sort of has that, having that comic book as part of the Armageddon has allowed us to actually be encouraged to get it out there when we meet these international talents like Peter David, you know, and Grant Morrison from The Boys, right? Not Grant Morrison. I think it's not Grant Morrison.
No,
Oh,
yeah.
the guy who did the
Warren Ellis, was it? No, it's
oh gosh, what's his name? Hold on, let me pull this out. Derek Robertson. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Derek Robertson from The Boys. So this is his Transmetropolitan artwork over here.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so yeah, so I mean, we should have had The Boys guys over, right? Because, you know, it's a big thing, or whatever. But it's such a sad thing not to have comic book as part of this expo that actually comic books was a huge part of to get them to this stage.
Yeah.
So yeah, but thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, and hopefully, you know, yeah, we'll get to see you on in person, as they say.
Right.
And appreciate it. I'm going to look forward to your podcast soon, and
Yep.
your channel. Thank you so much.
All
Hey,
right.
before you go, do you want to like do you want to? I'll go put you solo, and you can do a little you know, promo for
Just say goodbye or tell people where they can find me.
exactly both. And we'll
Okay,
finish off.
well, first I want to thank everybody for watching this, you know, for having me on, and this has been great. And the New Zealand people, I miss you. I want to come back. So I hope to come back because I had the best time there. But you can find me if you want to find more of me. Things, if you watch the anime series on Netflix, Dota Dragon's Blood, I worked on the 3 seasons of that. My film Tango Shalom is streaming on Amazon. I don't know if it's in New Zealand or not. You can also find it on Peacock if you get that. And if you're in Germany, Tango Shalom is opening at a Jewish film festival in Berlin next month, and then it opens across Germany in October. You can find me on my YouTube channel, The Burnett Network, and on my show, Robservations. You can find me on Sunday mornings on Let's Get Physical Media at 11 p.m. Pacific Standard, or now Daylight Time. And yeah, that's about it. Whatever other YouTube shows like this one that I'm bouncing around on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right.
All right, man. Well, Aru, thank you for having me on.
You're welcome, and thank you for coming on. So, ka kite anō, everyone, wherever you are, be well, be safe, and give your loved ones a hug. And we'll see you next time.
All right.
Ka
I'll
kite
see you
anō.
later.
Bye, guys. Bye, Robert. Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.